live my life.
Okay. I'm milling about with Clayne Crawford, and he is starring in The Killing of Two Lovers. It is such a great pleasure to meet you. I've always been a big fan.
It's a pleasure meeting you, Robin. Thank you.
Do you like my backdrop?
It's good looking. I know that town. That's Kanash, Utah, right there, buddy.
So yeah, tell me about finding this town and what and how you went about selecting a small town like this for the movie.
You know, look, for me as a producer on this film, it was more about providing creative support for Robert. So for me, Robert said, look, I'm going to go to this little town. He'd actually been writing another film that we were trying to make. We've been trying to do this for 10 years, trying to raise, yeah, 2009, right? So he was writing this other film at this artist loft. A friend of his had bought this turn of the century gymnasium that had been abandoned for 20 years, 30 years, beautiful structure in Kanash, Utah, and turned it into an art studio. And Robert would drive down. It's about an hour and 45 minutes from Provo, which is where Robert lives in Utah. Robert would go down and write in this little community. So when I went to him and said, hey, what if I write a check for us just to go make something?
That was nice of you.
Well, it was something that I needed to do for myself, right? I needed it. I needed to know why I was acting and why I was in this industry, and did I want to continue to do it? Because it can be quite nasty sometimes. And Robert said, he's like, heck yeah, man. He was like, here's a short, read this, tell me what you think. And I was like, and it was called The Drift. And it was amazing. And it was essentially the scene when David goes to pick up the kid or drop the kids off after the rockets, right? So in The Drift, it was him going to pick the kids up for the weekend and the boyfriend comes outside. So I was really interested. I said, look, if you can turn this into a feature, because I was confident that he could shoot it for the budget we had and for the 12 days that we had. Because he had created miracles before. So he went down to Kanash and he went to the artist loft and he wrote The Killing of Two Lovers in about 4 weeks. And as he was writing, he would walk the town, which is, maybe a mile from one end to the other. And then there's nothing within for 30, 45 minutes in any direction. So as he's writing in this town of Kanash, he makes relationships with some of the locals. When there's only 350 people in a town, everyone knows you're there, right? And then you're going to slowly begin to meet people at the Mercantile and the gas station. So he would tell them about the story he was writing, and he had already fallen in love with the red brick house that David is climbing out of at the opening of the film. And he said, yeah, I'm just so interested in a man living with his dad, but he can still see the house that his wife and children live in. And Jeremy goes, well, you see that house right there? Well, that's where Susan lives. And right there, that's Gary. And they've been broken up for about 3 years now. And he goes, holy crap. And he called me and he goes, we have to shoot here. And it was the geography. It was and when he said, I love this brick house, he said to Jeremy, do you think we can find out who lives in this house? He goes, oh yeah, that's pretty easy. That's my mom and dad, No. Absolutely. So the house that me and my father live in was actually my father. Jeremy's in the movie. He plays Jeremy. He's the guy that's got a plot in the backyard that I can bury my daughter in if things happen. So Jeremy was our liaison for Kanash, Utah. So the long-winded answer is Robert wrote it there, and the film really came to life in that little town, and he could not see it playing anywhere else. Because initially we were going to shoot it in my small town of Alabama, where I live, and Kanash really kind of rebuilt itself.
I have to ask you about growing up in that small town. First of all, Clay, Alabama is where you're from. So does that have something to do with your name by any chance? Because you have such a movie star name, Clayne.
Oh, that's very sweet. Well, my name's William Joseph Crawford, and I grew up here in Clay. That's correct. And my grandma is a big historian, and she traced our family back to Scotland, the Crawfords, and Clayne Crawford was one of the first that came over. I didn't think Clayne Crawford was a good name, being a fella from Alabama. So I figured, well, maybe if I combine this gentleman and where I'm from, so I came up with Clayne. So it's kind of a made-up name that, at 17 seemed like a really good idea to change my name to something that I felt at that time was better than William Crawford, which obviously in hindsight, I kind of wish I still had my actual name as my stage name as well.
It's very James Deanish, it's like Clayne.
A lot to do, that helped. I'm sure that probably had a lot to do with it.
Now, it's interesting because not only did the director tell you to shoot here, but he also said to you, you have to use my kids, right? His kids are in the movie.
I couldn't imagine not using his kids. I mean, I know those little fellers. I mean, I've been around them all. So, I mean, I've watched half of them be born, right? Not technically in the room, I understand, but I've been with these little guys for so long. I knew that was a package deal, and everything we had discussed making had a child in it at some point. And I think that's, maybe it's because we both, love Paper Moon and film children that have crucial characters or roles, but also because he and I just love being dads, to simplify it. And I was excited to play a man that had so many children. And again, there was just zero question that we were going to use his boys. And then we were just so lucky to find Avery to come and play my daughter. And she fit right in.
Now, you actually had worked with your own son before in a movie that was the very first thing you actually produced, yeah? Called Tinker?
Tinker was me helping a friend who, ironically enough, I had helped me raise money to make a movie with Robert. And 3 weeks before we were supposed to start, he said, would you consider making this? And he had the script, and I was like, and I mean, a lifelong friend. And he said, look, if I shoot it on your property, and I just bought this other little farm, and he goes, if we shoot it there, can we make this movie? So I'm grateful to have a scrapbook of my little guy. And I've got my dog who passed away a couple of years ago. It's in that movie, and a piece of property that does not look like that anymore because of all the renovations and so forth. So I'm grateful for that little bit of that album, as it were. But I would not say that I produced that film. That was a labor of love, helping out some family member. So
you got to start somewhere, right?
Hey man, you got to start somewhere. And it was great because my little guy goes, well, this is awful. I'm never doing this again. All right, go get an education, big guy. So it served a great purpose.
Do you still have the farm in Alabama?
I do. That farm I actually leased out, but we live on a farm that I bought. That one of my I have a photograph of my great grandfather in his Civil War uniform sitting on this land. He had 600 acres, and I only have a portion of it now because it had all been sold off and commercialized and so forth. But I'm sitting on a piece of land that has been in my family for almost 200 years. Pretty amazing.
That's some legacy.
It's really neat. And it had been sold off. I had to buy it from a man in Oregon, and he was kind enough to sell this piece of land to me. And it's pretty amazing raising your children with that kind of history.
That's great. So now getting back to The Killing of Two Lovers, let's unpack this a little bit, because I know there's a lot going on. It's about a marriage that's ending. It's about a father who wants to hold on to his kids. So you could probably relate to that in many ways, because don't you come from a family of divorce and then they remarried, and right? You've got 3 kids.
I didn't get divorced, but my wife had a daughter when I met her. When I met my wife in LA, she had been transferred to a job in LA. She was from Houston, and her daughter were living there together. And I kid with my wife. I'm not sure who I fell in love with first, my daughter or her, right? So we're all from complicated families. But we're all from Southern families, which most of it's a bunch of lies and secrets, right? So no one really wants to tell what actually happened for the most part. But what I can relate to, Robin, is not waking up with my little guys at the house. I can't imagine not just like deciding at 3 o'clock, let's grab some PB&Js and go down to the pond and fish for the next hour before mom makes dinner, right? So to think about trying to squeeze all of my love into every other weekend, I can see how that would lead to poor decisions and irrational behavior. I've also been in situations, I think we all have, we've been pushed to the brink of, I'm thinking of doing things that I would never think about doing and that I would judge someone else for doing. And I think that's why this story was so compelling to me, is that all of us are capable within the same hour of doing great acts of kindness or great acts of violence, just truly depending on where we're pushed. I think survival is a word that gets kind of thrown around, but I think in a lot of ways, David is trying to survive, and he's scratching and clawing.
You must have had an incredible time during this pause period, then, being home with your family.
Oh, I keep reading articles and people are talking about like, what is everyone's dogs going to do when they go back to work? I don't know what my child is going to do, because I've been making these movies. Robert and I just made our last film here in Alabama. I was like home at night and, able to kind of read to him. And then I would take my other son to school, and, I'm still taking care of the horses and everything. So it has been bliss, complete bliss. And again, I don't know what me and my 8-year-old are going to do when things go back to normal, because we've just been together every second of the day. So as much as I'm looking forward to us all getting back to normal, I think that's definitely going to be a challenge.
You'll have to just take them with you.
Yes. Yes, I will.
Clayne, really great to meet you. Thank you so much.
Robin, thank you for taking the time today.
All right, have a great one.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Always news.
Always refreshing.
Always candid.
Always milling about.
Robin Milling delivers what celebrities are saying to you.